Jordan Mitchell, a 34-year-old high school English teacher, stood at an even 6 feet with a lean build, the kind that came from early morning jogs and weekend basketball games with his students. His deep brown skin glistened under the classroom lights, his black hair neatly cropped and edged to perfection. His wardrobe, though professional, bore hints of his personality, button-down shirts with vibrant ties and polished shoes that reflected both care and pride. Jordan's warm, inviting smile was often the first thing his students noticed, and his eyes held the kind of empathy that immediately put people at ease. A passionate educator, Jordan didn't just teach literature. He used stories to open his students' minds to the complexities of life, often weaving in lessons about empathy, resilience, and the importance of finding one's voice. Raised in the same city where he now taught, he understood the struggles many of his students faced: poverty, broken homes, and the weight of feeling overlooked. It was this connection to his roots that fueled his mission to inspire and uplift. His colleagues described him as dedicated, his students called him Mr. M, and to his friends, he was the guy who always had time to listen. Beneath his confident demeanor, however, Jordan carried the quiet weight of self-imposed pressure. He constantly questioned whether he was making enough of a difference. Could he reach every student? Was he truly breaking through? These thoughts often lingered during his solitary moments, but they never overshadowed the unwavering commitment he brought to his classroom every single day. Jordan's mornings began before sunrise. His alarm rang at 5:30 a.m., pulling him from sleep with a soft chime. After a quick jog around the neighborhood, a ritual that cleared his mind, he brewed his morning coffee, savoring the brief tranquility before the day's chaos ensued. By 6:45, he was out the door, a leather satchel slung over his shoulder, brimming with lesson plans, graded essays, and the occasional motivational note from a student taped to the inside flap. His commute to Westbrook High was a 20-minute drive through a mix of suburban streets and bustling city roads. The school, a red-bricked building with ivy creeping up its sides, was nestled between a community park and a small shopping center. By 7:15, Jordan was in his classroom, a space that felt more like a second home. Inspirational quotes adorned the walls: Maya Angelou, James Baldwin, Langston Hughes, and student artwork lined the bulletin boards. His desk, though cluttered with papers and coffee mugs, held personal touches: a framed photo of his late mother, a small succulent named Leif Erikson, gifted by a student, and a collection of colorful pens he insisted made grading slightly less painful. By 8 a.m., the halls buzzed with students, their laughter and chatter echoing off the lockers. Jordan greeted each passerby with a nod or a joke, making mental notes of who seemed off or who might need extra attention. His classes were a blend of structured lessons and lively discussions. He challenged students to think critically, often asking questions that had no easy answers, encouraging them to see beyond the surface of the texts they read. Lunch was rarely peaceful. More often than not, a handful of students would linger in his classroom, seeking advice, sharing stories, or just enjoying the safe space he provided. Jordan welcomed it. This, he believed, was where real teaching happened, between classes, in those candid moments of connection. Westbrook High was a microcosm of the surrounding community, diverse, vibrant, and not without its challenges. The front lawn, though neatly trimmed, bore the scars of years of foot traffic, with patches of dirt marking shortcuts taken by students rushing to class. Faded blue banners flapped against the breeze, proudly declaring the school's motto: strength in diversity, excellence in unity. The building's exterior, a mix of old brick and newer glass additions, reflected the school's ongoing efforts to modernize without losing its historic charm. Inside, the atmosphere was a whirlwind of adolescent energy. The corridors were a kaleidoscope of personalities: athletes boasting about last night's game, theater kids rehearsing lines under their breath, and clusters of friends huddled around phones, sharing the latest viral videos. Teachers navigated the sea of students with practiced ease, offering reminders, high fives, and the occasional stern look. Jordan's classroom was tucked at the end of the third-floor hallway, far enough from the main entrance to escape the morning rush, but close enough to hear the distant hum of activity. The walls were painted a calming shade of blue, chosen deliberately to foster a welcoming environment. Desks were arranged in a semicircle, encouraging discussion rather than isolation. At the front, a large whiteboard bore the day's agenda, often accompanied by a thought-provoking quote. "What's your story, and who gets to tell it?" was today's prompt. Natural light streamed through the wide windows, casting a warm glow over the shelves lined with books. Classic literature sat alongside contemporary works, reflecting Jordan's belief that every student should see themselves in what they read. Posters of literary icons were interspersed with student achievements, showcasing everything from poetry contest wins to heartfelt thank-you notes. The room smelled faintly of coffee and lavender, the latter from a diffuser discreetly tucked behind his desk. Despite the occasional scuff marks on the floors and the temperamental heating system, the space exuded warmth and acceptance. It was a sanctuary for many, a place where voices were heard, ideas were challenged, and growth was inevitable. Students who entered often did so with the weight of the world on their shoulders, but left feeling a little lighter. Yet, not everyone appreciated Jordan's approach. He had overheard whispers in the faculty lounge, comments about him trying too hard or pushing an agenda, with his emphasis on social issues and representation. Some parents, too, had raised concerns, questioning the relevance of certain books he assigned or the open discussions he encouraged in class. Jordan, ever professional, brushed these remarks aside publicly, but they gnawed at him in quiet moments. That morning, as he sipped his coffee and reviewed his lesson plan, an email notification pinged on his laptop. It was from the school administration, subject line, "Parent concern regarding classroom content." His stomach tightened. He clicked it open, scanning the formal language, his eyes catching on phrases like inappropriate discussions and questionable teaching methods. He sighed, the weight of familiar tension settling over him. He shook it off for now, focusing instead on the eager faces beginning to fill his classroom. Still, a small voice in the back of his mind whispered, "This isn't over." It was during Jordan's third period class when the disruption finally revealed itself. The day had been proceeding smoothly, the students engaged in a spirited discussion about To Kill a Mockingbird and its themes of justice and morality. Jordan had posed a challenging question: how do the concepts of empathy and prejudice play out in our society today? Students raised hands eagerly, their voices overlapping with excitement. For Jordan, these moments were the heartbeat of his teaching philosophy: real conversations, real connections. Then, the classroom phone rang. He paused, signaling to his students to continue their discussion as he answered. "Mr. Mitchell speaking. Jordan, can you come to the principal's office during your prep period?" The voice of Principal Reynolds was polite, but carried an undercurrent of tension. "Of course. Is everything okay? We just need to go over a concern that's come up. See you at 11:15. The line clicked off before Jordan could probe further. He hung up, his mind racing. Concern? Was it related to that email? He glanced at his students. Naomi passionately countered a point made by her classmate, her hands animated in the air. Jordan forced a smile, masking the tightness forming in his chest. "Great insights, everyone. Let's keep this momentum going." As the bell rang, signaling the end of the period, Jordan packed up his materials slower than usual. The short walk to the principal's office felt unusually long. Inside, he found Principal Reynolds seated at his desk, alongside Mrs. Clark, the assistant principal, and, unexpectedly, Ms. Hargrove, a parent known for her vocal opinions at school board meetings. "Jordan, thanks for coming," Reynolds began. "It seems there's been a complaint regarding some of the discussions in your classroom." Ms. Hargrove wasted no time. "I just don't think it's appropriate for my son to be discussing racism and privilege in an English class. My child comes to school to learn about grammar and literature, not to be made to feel guilty about things he has no control over." Jordan's mouth opened, then closed. This wasn't new, but it never got easier. Jordan took a breath, choosing his words carefully. "Ms. Hargrove, I understand your concern. My intention isn't to make anyone feel guilty, but to encourage critical thinking about the world we live in. Literature is a reflection of society. Understanding its context helps students become more empathetic and informed." Reynolds nodded, but added, "We just need to be mindful of how these discussions are framed." Jordan felt heat creep up his neck. Mindful? His entire approach was rooted in care and inclusivity. With respect, Principal Reynolds, these conversations arise naturally from the material. It's hard to discuss To Kill a Mockingbird without addressing issues of race and justice. Ms. Hargrove crossed her arms. My son said you asked the class if they ever experienced or witnessed racism. That's not your place. Jordan's jaw tightened. That question was part of fostering open dialogue. Students weren't required to share, and many found it empowering. Still, he knew arguing would be futile here. I hear your concerns, he finally said, though it tasted bitter. Walking back to his classroom afterward, Jordan felt a knot of frustration twist in his stomach. Was he supposed to sanitize literature? Ignore the very issues that affected many of his students daily? He prided himself on creating a space where all voices could be heard. But today, his own felt silenced. The incident lingered with Jordan throughout the day, casting a shadow over his usual enthusiasm. His next class felt heavier. He found himself second-guessing his words, measuring his language with an unfamiliar caution. The vibrancy that normally infused his teaching dulled under the weight of the complaint. During lunch, his usual group of students trickled into his classroom, chattering about weekend plans and homework. Naomi noticed his subdued demeanor. You good, Mr. M? You seem off. Jordan forced a smile. Just a long morning, Naomi. Nothing you all need to worry about. But it wasn't nothing. The ripple effect of the meeting was already evident. That afternoon, he received an email from the district office requesting copies of his recent lesson plans for review, a procedure that, while framed as standard protocol, felt more like scrutiny. By the time the final bell rang, Jordan was exhausted. Not from the teaching, but from the emotional toll of being questioned for doing what he believed was right. As he packed up to leave, his phone buzzed with a notification. Curiosity piqued. He opened it and froze. A post on a local community Facebook group was making rounds. The headline read, High school teacher pushing personal agenda on our kids. Below it was a poorly worded but inflammatory description of Jordan's class, posted by none other than Ms. Hargrove. The comments section was already buzzing with mixed reactions, some defending him, others piling on with assumptions and misinformation. Jordan's chest tightened. This wasn't just a private complaint anymore. This was public. The Facebook post spread faster than Jordan could have anticipated. By the next morning, it had accumulated over 100 comments and dozens of shares. Some parents expressed support, praising Jordan for encouraging thoughtful discussions. Others, however, latched onto Ms. Hargrove's narrative, claiming their children shouldn't be subjected to divisive topics. The community was split, and tension at Westbrook High was palpable. Jordan's inbox flooded with emails. Some were from parents offering words of encouragement, but many were laced with accusations and demands for his resignation. One message read, Stick to grammar and keep your politics out of our kids' heads. Another simply said, We don't need people like you teaching our children. What stung the most wasn't just the criticism. It was how quickly a few voices had amplified into a mob mentality. The school administration, seeking damage control, requested Jordan refrain from addressing the controversy with students. Let us handle the communication, Principal Reynolds insisted. Jordan, though, felt muzzled. His students deserved transparency, but now he was expected to carry on as if nothing had happened. The media soon caught wind of the story. Local reporters camped outside the school gates, cameras poised for any comment. Jordan kept his head down, dodging their questions as he entered and left the building. Students noticed the cameras too. Some whispered in hallways, others voiced support, but the air buzzed with tension. Then came the school board's announcement. A special meeting would be held to address community concerns. Jordan wasn't invited to speak, just observe. He sat in the back as parents took turns at the microphone. Ms. Hargrove, unsurprisingly, was among the first to speak. We send our kids here to learn facts, not opinions, she declared. Her words met with a smattering of applause. Jordan clenched his fists under the table. His curriculum was district-approved. His lessons, rooted in empathy. Yet here he was, vilified for doing his job. Amid the chaos, several key figures emerged. Naomi, one of Jordan's most vocal students, took to social media to defend him. Her post, heartfelt and raw, read, Mr. M's class taught me how to think for myself. Isn't that what school is for? Her message garnered support from many peers, sparking the hashtag We Stand With Mr. M among students. On the faculty side, reactions were mixed. Ms. Bennett, the history teacher, privately offered Jordan a comforting pat on the back. This is ridiculous, she said. You've always put those kids first. Mr. Larson, the math teacher, however, avoided eye contact in the staff lounge. Jordan couldn't ignore the tension. A few colleagues believed the controversy was self-inflicted. Parents, too, began taking sides. Mrs. Diaz, whose daughter struggled with confidence until joining Jordan's debate club, reached out. "You changed my child's life," she said, voice thick with emotion. "Don't let them drag you down." Yet others, like Mr. Caldwell, a prominent local business owner, publicly called for Jordan's suspension. "Teachers should teach, not preach," Caldwell proclaimed on a local news segment. Even Jordan's personal life felt the strain. His sister, Angela, called from out of town. "Why aren't you speaking up?" she urged. "You can't let them tell your story for you." But Jordan was torn. Defending himself could pour gasoline on the fire, yet silence felt like surrender. As the week wore on, allies emerged, but so did critics. The lines were drawn, and Jordan stood, unwillingly, at the center of a storm he never sought. Nights became the hardest. Alone in his modest apartment, Jordan stared at the ceiling, replaying the past days over and over. His phone buzzed with notifications, articles, opinions, people dissecting his character without ever having met him. How did it come to this? He dedicated years to uplifting his students, sacrificing weekends for lesson planning, staying after school for those who needed a listening ear. And now, he was being painted as a villain. Doubt not at him. Maybe I did push too hard. But that thought was fleeting. No, his classroom discussions weren't about politics. They were about humanity. Books like To Kill a Mockingbird and The Hate You Give offered lenses through which students could explore the world's complexities. Isn't that what education is supposed to do? Yet the weight of the backlash was suffocating. He found himself scanning comments late into the night, unable to look away from the vitriol. "Race baiter," one read. "Teaching kids to hate themselves," said another. The words burrowed deep, echoing long after he closed his phone. He tried calling a close friend for distraction, but ended the call after a few minutes, unable to mask the exhaustion in his voice. Sleep eluded him. His mind spun with worst-case scenarios: being fired, his reputation ruined, students losing trust in him. By morning, his reflection in the mirror showed the toll: dark circles under weary eyes, shoulders sagging. Driving to work, a familiar route felt foreign. Was every driver passing by someone who'd read the article? Did that person at the gas station recognize him from the news? Paranoia seeped in. At school, some students approached him with concern, but others avoided eye contact, as if unsure how to act around him now. And through it all, Jordan grappled with one relentless question: was standing by my principles worth this cost? The school board meeting loomed, a final chance to address the controversy. Jordan debated attending. Part of him wanted to stay home, let the storm pass. But another part, the one that drove him to teach in the first place, refused to cower. If I don't stand up for myself, what example does that set for my students? That afternoon, Naomi stopped by after class. "They're having an open forum," she said, eyes bright with determination. "You should speak, Mr. M. We believe in you." Jordan hesitated. Words had been his strength, but now they felt like landmines. Still, something in Naomi's gaze, a mix of respect and hope, ignited a flicker of resolve. As he left school that day, the setting sun cast a golden hue over the horizon. Jordan glanced upward, taking a steadying breath. This isn't just about me anymore. The battle lines were drawn, and the stage was set. The coming confrontation would demand more than eloquence. It would require courage. The storm was far from over. But Jordan Mitchell was done standing in the shadows. The night of the school board meeting arrived, tension thick in the air. The auditorium brimmed with parents, students, faculty, and local media. Cameras perched on tripods, their red recording lights glowing ominously. Jordan, seated toward the back, felt his heartbeat echo in his ears. Every glance thrown his way seemed loaded with judgment or sympathy. Neither was comforting. Principal Reynolds opened the proceedings with a rehearsed neutrality. "We're here tonight to address community concerns regarding recent classroom discussions at Westbrook High. We ask everyone to remain respectful." Ms. Hargrove was quick to approach the microphone. Her voice, clear and unwavering, carried across the room. "Our children should be taught facts, not opinions." Mr. Mitchell crossed a line by bringing personal and political views into the classroom. "We need accountability." Applause rippled through a portion of the crowd, Those scattered boos followed. Jordan clenched his fists, nails biting into his palms. Anger simmered beneath his calm facade, but it was a controlled burn, not an explosion. Then, unexpectedly, Naomi rose from her seat. "Can I speak?" she asked the board. Reynolds hesitated but nodded. Naomi stepped up, her voice shaking but determined. "Mr. Mitchell never pushed an agenda. He challenged us to think, to understand different perspectives. I used to hate English class. Now, I feel like I have a voice." Her words quieted the room, some faces softening. Others followed. Mrs. Diaz spoke of her daughter's newfound confidence. Even a few teachers voiced support. Yet, for every supportive comment, there was pushback, parents echoing Ms. Hargrove's concerns, accusing Jordan of indoctrination. Finally, Reynolds addressed Jordan directly. "Mr. Mitchell, would you like to respond?" Jordan stood slowly, heart pounding. This is it. Walking to the podium felt like wading through quicksand. Jordan adjusted the microphone, eyes scanning the crowd, faces familiar and foreign, supportive and hostile. He inhaled deeply. "I became a teacher to make a difference," he began. "Not to push an agenda, but to encourage critical thinking. Literature isn't just about grammar and vocabulary. It's about understanding the human experience." He paused, searching for the right words. "When we discuss books like To Kill a Mockingbird, we're not just talking about fiction. We're confronting real-world issues, issues our students face outside these walls. Ignoring those realities doesn't protect them. It leaves them unprepared." A murmur rippled through the audience, agreement from some, skepticism from others. Then Jordan did something unexpected. He pulled out a letter. "This was written by a former student," he said, unfolding the paper. "Your class taught me to speak up for myself. I faced bullying for who I am, and those discussions gave me courage. That's why I do this." His voice wavered but held firm. Just as he finished, a figure stood at the back of the room, a woman Jordan hadn't seen in years. Mrs. Phillips, his own high school English teacher. "Excuse me," she called out, stepping forward. "Jordan Mitchell was once my student. I saw firsthand his commitment to understanding people's stories. If this is what teaching looks like, we should be proud." Gasps echoed. No one had expected a personal connection from the past. Jordan blinked, stunned. Her presence, her words, hit deeper than any applause could. The room's atmosphere shifted. The debate wasn't just about curriculum anymore. It was about integrity, legacy, and the ripple effect of one teacher's influence. As Jordan stepped down from the podium, a wave of emotions crashed over him. Relief, gratitude, exhaustion. Mrs. Phillips approached, enveloping him in a warm hug. "You've made me proud," she whispered. His eyes stung with unshed tears. This is why I teach." Outside the auditorium, clusters of people debated animatedly, but many approached Jordan with words of support. Naomi handed him a handmade card signed by students. "Thank you for believing in us." He held it close, heart swelling. Yet, amidst the warmth, there was still coldness. Miss Hargrove passed by with a curt glance, her opinion unchanged. Jordan knew he couldn't reach everyone, but that was never the goal. Change, he realized, wasn't about unanimous approval. It was about planting seeds, even in rocky soil. Driving home that night, streetlights casting fleeting shadows across his windshield, Jordan reflected on the whirlwind of the past weeks. Fear had nearly silenced him, but standing up, facing the storm head-on, brought clarity. He remembered a quote from one of his favorite authors: "Courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it." Pulling into his driveway, he sat in the quiet car, hand resting on the signed card. The chaos hadn't magically disappeared, but something within him had shifted. He felt lighter, not because the fight was over, but because he'd chosen to face it with honesty and heart. Tomorrow, the world would keep spinning. Comments would still swirl online. Opinions would clash. But for tonight, Jordan allowed himself to breathe, to feel pride not just in surviving the ordeal, but in standing unwavering in his truth. The days following the school board meeting brought a noticeable shift. Though the controversy didn't vanish overnight, the tide of public opinion began to soften. Supportive messages flooded Jordan's inbox, many from parents and former students sharing how his teaching had impacted them. One email, from a student he'd taught years ago, read, "Your class was the first place I felt seen. Thank you for that." Jordan read it twice, warmth blossoming in his chest. At school, The atmosphere gradually lightened. Students greeted him with smiles and words of encouragement. Naomi and a group of classmates organized a "Thank you, Mr. M" banner outside his classroom. Seeing it for the first time, Jordan paused, overcome with emotion. "You didn't have to," he started, but Naomi grinned. "We wanted to." Jordan also reached out to Ms. Hargrove, despite their opposing views. Over coffee at a local cafe, he listened as she voiced her concerns. "I just don't want my daughter feeling guilty for things out of her control," she admitted. Jordan nodded. "I never wanted that either. My goal is understanding, not blame." Their conversation didn't end in perfect agreement, but there was mutual respect, a step forward. These actions, small yet significant, helped mend the fractures. Jordan realized healing wasn't about changing every mind. It was about building bridges where possible. By the end of the semester, the tension that once clouded Westbrook High had lifted. Jordan's classroom buzzed with renewed energy. Students engaged in discussions with thoughtfulness, challenging ideas while respecting differing perspectives. The controversy, once a shadow looming over the school, became a catalyst for growth. The administration, recognizing the importance of open dialogue, introduced optional workshops on respectful discourse. Jordan was invited to lead the first session. Standing before a room of teachers and parents, he felt a mix of nerves and pride. "It's not about agreeing on everything," he explained. "It's about creating spaces where people feel heard." The workshop ended with a standing ovation, a moment that would linger in his memory. Outside the classroom, Jordan noticed subtle changes. Hallway conversations among students reflected deeper empathy. Naomi, once hesitant to speak up, ran for student council and won. "You inspired me," she told Jordan, beaming. Faculty members who had remained neutral during the controversy began offering words of appreciation. Even Mr. Larson, previously distant, stopped by one afternoon. "Didn't agree with how it all went down," he said, "but you handled yourself with class." Jordan's approach to teaching evolved too. He balanced challenging topics with lighter moments, ensuring students felt both safe and stimulated. Education, he realized, wasn't just about lessons, it was about connection. Late one evening, Jordan sat at his desk, grading essays as soft jazz played in the background. He paused, glancing at a framed photo of his first year teaching. So much has changed, he mused. The road had been rougher than he anticipated, but standing on the other side, he felt stronger. Not invincible, but resilient. He thought about the lessons learned, not just by his students, but by himself. Courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was standing up even when fear weighed heavy. Change wasn't always welcomed, but sometimes discomfort was necessary for growth. And perhaps the most surprising revelation? Kindness and listening could be more transformative than any argument. Jordan closed the final essay, satisfied. His phone buzzed, a text from Angela. "Proud of you, bro. You stood tall." Smiling, he typed back, "Couldn't have done it without the people around me." Because in the end, it wasn't just his fight. It was a collective journey, one that reminded him why he stepped into a classroom every morning. The school year's final day arrived, students buzzing with excitement. Jordan stood at his classroom door, exchanging farewells and high fives. "Have a great summer, Mr. M," Naomi called, waving. Jordan chuckled. "You too, councilwoman." As the hallways emptied, he returned to his desk, taking in the familiar room. The posters, the worn desks, the lingering scent of dry erase markers. This space had been a battleground, a haven, a place of growth. He glanced at the "Thank you, Mr. M" banner, still taped to the wall, and felt a swell of gratitude. Before leaving, he wrote a message on the whiteboard. "Your voice matters. Use it wisely. Mr. M." Stepping back, he smiled. Those words weren't just for his students. They were for himself too. Outside, the sun bathed the school in a golden glow. Jordan paused at the entrance, breathing in the warm air. The road ahead would have challenges, he knew that. But with each step forward, he carried the lessons of the past months. Speak up. Stand firm. Lead with empathy. As he walked toward his car, a breeze rustled the trees, whispering of new beginnings. And for the first time in a long while, Jordan felt ready.